Hi, welcome back to Future Fast, and thank you so much for following. And I hope you're enjoying it as well. And if you're here for the first time, you are either aware that this is the second part of the conversation with Viju Parameshwar. And I sincerely urge you, please go back and listen to the first part of the conversation where he shares his journey. And believe me, it's amazing and uh, uh, close to some of the scenes that stayed out of some Bollywood movie, but it's really fun as well. So please do go back, catch up, because that will also give you a good perspective of where he comes from in the conversation that we're going to have right now. And uh, thank you. I'm sure you're enjoying it. And if you're not yet subscribed, do subscribe to Future Fast right away. Viju, once again, thank you so much for making time to do this. Uh, while we have this is the second part, but we have two parts to this as well. But I want to start the first part with uh, uh, basically, pick your brain on leadership development. See, you got started with Tata's from TAS, so want to understand how what is your view on the way leadership development happens at Tata's, and your view or perspective on you spent long years in Unilever, where it's also regarded, at least in an India context, they were referred to as a CEO factory. Uh, uh, and how do you regard that? And what is your own personal takeaway from the point of leadership development, which you eventually try to also uh, create some kind of a leadership development program within Klüber lubrications as well?
Yeah. The Tata Administrative Service, uh, the first 15 months while you're a probationer, has an excellent training system. So at least in the days that we were there, I'm sure it's changed a lot now. But in 76, when I joined, we started with about a month and a half to 2 months in the central departments of Tata's. So you might spend 4 days with what used to be called the Department of Economics and Statistics. In those days, a large number of people made clippings from newspapers because nothing was digital then. You had to clip it, paste it into large registered and store it. So anything you needed, you could access from old newspapers, headed by a well-known economist, right? Originally, it was created by Freddie Mehta, who became a director of Tata's, who was an economist. And in the time that we were there, there was a gentleman called Mr. Pense, also well-known economist. And one of their tasks was to write speeches for the chairman. So they had all this and make policy recommendations and so on. Anyway, I don't want to get too much detail. Like this, there were so many different departments. There was a labor department with 2 lawyers. You would go with them to the labor courts in Bombay, see how cases are being fought, get a good exposure for 4 or 5 days. 4 days in this Department of Economics and Statistics, 3 or 4 days in what used to be called Tata Economic Consultancy Service. They had a newsletter. I wrote an article for that, did a little research, had to write. So like this, you go around different, apart from the first 3 or 4 days of, of the life of JRD Tata and JN Tata and how the family was and who's related to whom and the values and all that stuff. Thereafter, you select 4 companies and you spend 2 months, 2.5 months in each company. Those days, there was a mix of, on the one side, people thought of you as very special coming from the TAS. You were treated very nicely. You were put up in the best guest houses. You had automatic membership to the best club, which was normally run by the Tatas, wherever you were. On the other hand, no flying was allowed. Okay, wherever you have to travel to Jamshedpur from Bombay, Calcutta, you have to go only by train. So I went to Mithapur first, Tata Chemicals. In each place, they gave you a big project and you have to work totally independently to do that project. That's how you were evaluated. So in the process of doing the project, you got to know the facility and the people and so on. So I went to Tata Chemicals I did a project at Mithapur, came back to the head office, and they gave me another smaller project in finance. And then that was it. Then I went to Tata Steel, where I spent something like 6-7 weeks in Jamshedpur and 3-4 weeks in their sales office in Calcutta. Did a project. Then I spent, before that, I spent 2 months in Tata Finlay, half the time in Bombay and half, about 2 weeks in Munnar, and did a project there. And the last stint was supposed to have been in Tata Oil Mills. But by the time I was starting there, Mr. Krishna Kumar of Tata Finlay, pushed the TA secretariat to release me early. And so I joined Tata Finlay for my final job. Okay. So this was the process for the first year. Normally for a year, for me it was less than a year. After that, there was no formal leadership development process. Then it was more left to each company and to the mentor and boss and what happened. So each part of the organization would be different. There was nothing, there was nothing standardized. Each company had its own thing.
Oh,
and each
so there is
company
no
had its own style.
get back to say how's this year has been for you, and even as TAs, no checking on how's your career progressing, nothing like that.
Very little. So you see, in the early years of the TAs, when it was formed in the late 50s, they were never attached to any company. They were sitting in the center. They were kind of right-hand men of a few of the most powerful directors. So each director would have 3, 4, 5 of these guys. And they would go out for temporary assignments when there's a problem in this company or that company. When they reviewed this after 7, 8, 9 years of TAS's existence, it was felt that this is seen as too much of a, like headquarters guy going, and he's not belonging to any company, and then making a career in a company is not going to happen. So then after that, the idea was that people should join a company after the first year and absorb themselves into the company, be part of the company, and not, so there would no longer be a separate TAS, let's say, salary scale or anything. Once you're in that company, then you got to get absorbed into that company's thing. Right. And everything going well, then you make your way in that company. So they didn't want to retain this special feeling, because then they were not becoming part of the everyday company. So therefore that's all. Then after that, whatever that company's systems are, and they were totally different in each company.
So what makes Unilever a CEO factory then? How different is that? How was that?
Unilever, I think, had a very organized way of thinking about leadership development. First of all, there was a strong function. It was called management development. It wasn't called HR. It was called management development. That function itself. And they had very, very, very good people there. So you had, when a trainee joins, they used to have 1.5 years of detailed training, meaning a person, if suppose he's sales and marketing, he would be 2 months as a salesman. So he's the salesman of some place. Okay. In my case, it was, I wasn't a trainee, so I had a shorter stint when I joined. But still, I was the salesman selling soaps and detergents and so on for one territory.
Oh, okay, you had to go through that cycle.
I'm doing everything that the normal salesman will do. I have to spend the same amount of money that he's allowed to spend, stay in the same type of hotels, go in the buses and so on and so forth. So it was a real exposure to the system and roughing it out the way they have to do it day in and day out. And that becomes the base for your thinking and strategizing all your life afterwards, because you know how these guys, what they're doing. And for the trainee, there's also a 2.5 month stint in the villages in ETA. Okay, you have to go and live in a village with some villager in his hut, mud hut, eating whatever food he's eating for 2.5 months, and do something that village wants you to do. maybe building a bund, improving the water supply, doing something.
But how would they measure this? Uh, how does this performance
So there'll be
evaluation
a project. There are supervisors for this,
in
for
the
the
village?
it's called Tata Rural Development Project, right?
Okay.
So there are supervisors who are going around all the villages, seeing what you're doing, agreeing the project with the village elders or whatever. What do they need? That would have been agreed. And then you and maybe 2, 3 other people are also working on that. Could be a check dam or could be whatever they need, right? Improving things there. So they're seeing how, so the evaluation is on quantitative, but also qualitative measures. How are you getting along with the people? Are you able to live and survive and sort of, be at comfort with people who are different from you?
How long was this?
For a normal management trainee, this would be a 2 month, 2.5 month kind of thing.
For you?
No, I didn't do it because
Or you didn't do these parts? Yeah, you came in with almost 5, 6 years.
Yeah. So anyway, that's the starting point, okay? And then, and every stint, of course, there's a supervisor and you're being evaluated. I'll give you an example. After my 3 weeks of being a salesman, for 1 week, I was supposed to have worked with a supervisor, sales supervisor in Nagpur. But as it happened, the branch manager of Bombay branch, which covered Nagpur, came there and was visiting and was traveling. So he said, you come with me. So the next 3 days, I was with him, right? And he was a relatively senior manager, one of the bright sparks, one of the very well-respected guys. He had just moved. He had been a brand manager before this for Surf. And if you remember, this was when Nirma was doing extremely well, growing like mad, Surf was under threat, blah, blah, blah. And he was evaluating, creating a new product to fight Nirma, which later was launched as Sunlight, right? So we go to the first distributor's shop in Nagpur. He looks at all their books. There are standard books you look at, see their stock levels and sales and how does it compare with the previous year and all that stuff. He never told me anything, but he was seeing whether I'm observing and understanding. Right? Then he started questioning the guy. Suppose we brought a product like this, which will be yellow color and which will be priced like this. Do you think it will do well against Nirma? What do you think should be the various questions, right? Seeking answers. Then we started driving, and the supervisor was in the car with us, and he was there. Then he started questioning the supervisor on exactly the same things, the same questions one by one. And suddenly he said, Viju, take over. So I was supposed to then start the questions to the supervisor, continuing from where he left off, to see whether I have been observing and remembering what he has done. So this is a quick, let's say, example of development, right? And then he would have evaluated me based on that. Another interesting thing is, in the early days in Hindustan Lever, most of the guys you meet, the senior guys, will ask you, what is your IIT entrance exam rank? I was really surprised so many years ago. But to most of them, that was the benchmark of where to slot you. Okay, then let's go on. So, and then we had a management training school. Hindustan Lever had a place in Bombay, which had a course running every day of the year. Right? So within 6 months of your joining, you do a 1-week course called the induction course, which broadly covers aspects of the company, but also a little bit of general management, a little bit on finance, a little bit on accounting, finance, a little bit on marketing, so that all guys are brought to some basic level. A year or year and a half later, you do something called the manager's course, which is a 2-week course, which is like a two-week MBA. All these courses are taught only by managers, no external faculty in those days. Right? Different managers are teaching different courses.
And The
Yeah.
participants are picked from across India at all this different businesses?
Yeah,
Or
at
was
that
it?
level of, at that stage of their career.
Hmm.
I mean, so 2 years, 1 year after joining, 2 years.
Everybody would be picked, or they used to,
Yes.
some
So
had to
everybody has to
qualify
do it.
to get.
No,
Oh,
no,
okay.
no. Every manager has to go through all this. These are the
Okay.
basic. These two are compulsory for all managers, right?
Okay.
Then over the next 3-4 years, there would be at least one or two more courses that you would be sent to. Could be finance for non-finance managers, could be something else, depending. So I'm talking now only about the courses, right? In every course, whatever the course, 1 week, 2 weeks, whatever it is, one evening is called the chairman's dinner. The last session that evening, the chairman arrives. It's typically at 7 o'clock or something. He comes after his work and he has a complete open session. You just ask questions and he will, answer it. After which, there's a dinner where all the senior managers are also invited to interact with people, right? So when you're a senior manager, every week you're being invited for dinner. So obviously you can't go every week, but occasionally you go to provide this input. Chairman will have a drink with people, say hello and all that, and push it off. But he'll remember everybody after.
Oh,
My impression every time I heard the chairman speak, whichever the chairman was at different times, I was always pleasantly surprised at his answer coming from a higher perspective, from a higher plane than what I expected. When a question is asked, I'm expecting an answer like this, and I'm surprised to find he's thinking about it at a completely different. So that was the learning always for me, that at that level, you're coming from a different way of thinking. You're not answering this just in that very narrow way, as the question was asked. Okay. Then at the end of your probation period, which is, if you're a trainee, it's 1.5 years or 2 years, depending on whether you're a postgraduate or not postgraduate. If you're a direct recruit like me coming with experience, it could be 6 months or 1 year, depends. At the end of that, you are asked to meet the director in charge of your vertical, whether functional or business. He interviews you for an hour or two. He asks whatever questions. I have seen cases where he says, I'm sorry, you don't know anything. You seem to be very weak commercially. Go and make a presentation on the commercial aspects of your business and come back tomorrow.
okay.
And so on, right? So he has to be really satisfied. Once he's satisfied, he says, go and meet the personnel director, HR director. And he sends a written report to the personnel director, who then interviews the guy. And if he's also satisfied, then he sends the guy to the chairman. So the chairman interviews every single manager before they are confirmed. And he remembers.
How many would that be, numbers?
So in my days, the total number of managers was, when I joined, was somewhere around 800. Right? So that may be, I don't know how many a year, might be 40, 50 a year. Right? And he would remember it. So in my case, I was not expecting this. Normally, people are called to Bombay for this. They know they're coming for the interviews, they're preparing and all that. I happened to be in Bombay on work, and suddenly Gopal just said, have you met Mr. Shah, who was the director in charge? I said, no, I met him at the interviews, 6-8 months ago, but I haven't met him after. So come, let's meet. So he takes me to Mr. Shah's office. Bipin, here's Viju. I don't know that this is a confirmation interview, right? He starts talking to me about the business that I'm running and what's going on. I explained to him for 1 hour, and he says, okay, very good. Go across the hall to the personnel director and meet him. He was an old, UP Khandani stylish guy. So I went there was no one there. Then he walked in and he said, who are you and why are you here? I said, I don't know why. Mr. Shah asked me to come here. Right. So, but he also didn't know. It wasn't a scheduled meeting. Right. So I go in and he says, okay, anyway, you're here. Let's have a chat. Where did you go to school? I said, Lawrence School, loved it. Oh, wonderful. Did you know a guy called Babu? I said, I remember him vaguely. He was a teacher when I was in the 5th standard and he left, right? So I only remember that he was there. And what do you remember about him? I said he in the bowling, he had a front-chested action and therefore bowled in-swingers. Okay. So he says, what do you think about in-swingers versus out-swingers? We discussed that for the next 45 minutes. By the time the file came from Mr. Shah, and he opened it and said, oh, now I know why you're here, right? And in the front of the file is Mr. Shah's typed report, which I am reading from outside. But anyway, he says, fine, it doesn't matter. And he puts it down. And we continue our discussion on cricket. And at the end of an hour of that, he said, okay, go and meet the chairman. So that was my confirmation. It was entirely on swing bowling.
No, but 800 people are interviewed by so many people.
800 total managers are there. These are only those who are being confirmed.
Oh, what is the rate? What ratio would be typically confirmed?
30, 40, 50 a year.
Oh, out of 800.
Every year, how many will join? People are there for 20 years. I don't know, but around 40, 50, I would imagine.
Wow. Okay. So even in PAS, people would be actually rejected?
Meaning?
As in they don't qualify in that finally?
I didn't understand. Once you're in the TAs?
Yeah, once you are in the TAs, because I think you mentioned Krishna Kumar saying even if you don't get through, you have a job here. What does that mean?
That's at the interviews. That's the interviews. You're not been selected yet.
Oh, okay, but once you're in, you're in. It's not
selected. Yeah. I mean, you have to do something drastic to then be kicked out. But here you don't have to be confirmed. In Hindustan Lever, in this process of these 3 people, any of them can say this guy is not ready, fit for confirmation. Normally, it means that the probation gets extended and then he again comes back and does the whole process. I've not heard of too many people being kicked out, but it's a tough process. Then you go and meet the chairman, then he has his own thing. But he remembers. So to my mind, this is another aspect of the leadership development. He remembers all the people from this. Okay.
From the dinner.
And now from this first interview he has during confirmation. Thereafter, one of the things that Hindustan Lever followed was to transfer people every 2-3 years. Why do you transfer? Because part of your development is by being put into unfamiliar surroundings. It can be unfamiliar because of location. It can be unfamiliar because of nature of work. So both things will be done. And therefore, you keep moving. You always get transferred every 2 years. So if you're a sales guy, first stint, you'll be area sales manager. After 1.5, 2 years, you'll become a brand manager. Then after 2-3 years, you'll go back as branch sales manager, where you'll have area sales managers reporting to you. Then you'll become a senior brand manager, and so on, right? So every time a transfer is happening, the file is discussed by management development head, that is the HR for management, along with the bosses, the directors and all of that department. But final word is with the chairman. And the chairman sometimes will say, I remember this guy in the interview, in the confirmation interview. I think this is not his strength. This job may not be suitable for him. Relook.
Wow.
Right. Then annual appraisals. Every manager's appraisal goes all the way up. So your appraiser, his boss will then look at it. His boss will look at it all the way to the chairman. The chairman spent enough time, looked at all the 800 or 850 managers' appraisals every year. Most of the time, no comments. None of them had comments. But sometimes one of the guys in the chain might have comments and might even push for changing the appraisal rating. Okay. So again, one more, cog in that. And then each individual, every manager was evaluated partly on developing his subordinates, his or her subordinates. So developing subordinates was one of your key MBOs, right? So all the time, development of people is a constant process by everyone. Now, for example, let me tell you Gopal's style. In those days, again, as I said, no computer and all. So if you want to discuss something with Gopal, you need a decision. You send a note about it. It has to be 1 page, not more. It will come back if there's any typographical errors, English errors, will come back. You have to correct all that, send it again. When it is finally okay, then you ask for an appointment, go to his secretary. Secretary will say, do you need 1 minute appointment, 3 minutes appointment, or 5 minutes appointment? Nothing longer than 5 minutes, right? Most of them will be 3 minute. So the appointment will be at 12:03, let us say, and it is for 3 minutes. And typically in the morning, you meet Gopal somewhere and he'll say, Viju, we're meeting at 12:03. He'll remember that also. Okay. At 12 o'clock, sometimes he'll call you and say, sorry, I'm running late. We won't be able to meet at 12:03. Please come at 12:05. You go at the appointed time, he'll take his watch and he'll put it like this. Okay, this way. And say, okay, now your time is starting. You don't have to repeat what's in the note that's taken as read, understood. Explain what are the key issues to come to a decision. In 2 minutes, if you have not reached somewhere near a decision point, he'll look at his watch like this. He'll say, Viju, in the next 1 minute, I don't think we're going to get to a decision. Go back, study it properly and come back, take another appointment. Or if you've done it perfectly, you'll get the decision in 3 minutes and you're out. So why did he do all this? According to him, that's part of your development. All the time spent in how do we do the presentation that I was telling you, how many times you went through the presentation, correct this word, that word, is it a tell chart, sell chart? So this is his personal way of developing you. Each guy had his own style, but developing people was a important thing taken up by most managers.
And what all did you take when you had to, or when you thought of doing something similar in
sorry,
Klüber?
before that, let me say, so this part of it is, I would call like coaching and mentoring.
Okay.
Right? There's formal training and there is what the individual is doing with you. And he may not spend the same amount of time with each person. According to him, later on when we talked about it, he would spend time only where he saw value, meaning everybody may not have the same potential in his opinion. He may not spend the same amount of time in trying to develop everyone.
So how does that happen? I mean, what point
thing. That's up to him.
So you don't set up a time.
Do a presentation and he might spend 1 iteration with them, or somebody else he might spend 3 or 4. I mean, I don't know. That's a personal evaluation at that moment, right? So one of the things, okay, again, coming back to the way the social structure was in those days, it was very authoritarian, right? One said, sir, I mean, called everybody sir. And many of the seniors used four-letter words, and you were. So there was a lot of, there was a certain culture which was considered normal in life, right? Authoritarian figures.
Was it same even in Tata?
I wasn't there long enough to know, but yes, I mean, Krishna Kumar could also be nasty. I've seen him after I was not there in Tata anymore, but I've been with him and with the way in which he has handled other people. And yes, can be very nasty. So people who are in power could be very tough and authoritarian.
And probably very less women in the office those days, right?
Sorry?
Very less women in office, or were there women at all?
There were women, yeah, but less than.
But a 4-letter word was acceptable to.
They may not do it in front of all the women, but yeah, I don't know. Oh, there's one aspect of women that I would like to mention later, but let me finish this. So, over that period of time, I developed gradually my own thoughts on what is appropriate, right? First of all, it depends on your personality. There are people who are very tough, and essentially that's their style. And there were others I know amongst the senior members of Hindustan Lever who only put it on because they thought that's appropriate, even though they were actually soft. Right? So I decided that that's not my way. Means I'm not comfortable with that, and with my subordinates, I was not, tough in that sense. Maybe too soft. I don't know. So I gradually developed my thoughts on how leadership should work, and I wrote it down. And at some point, I don't know, around 1990 or so, I tried it out with some of my subordinates, and it ultimately became 4 statements that I feel should define how an organization works, which got encapsulated in a manual and all in my last job. Number 1 is we need to be a high-performing team. And it's not just English language high-performing. There's a whole set of actually theory behind what is high-performing. Number 2 is every individual should behave like they're the owners of the company. So, for example, you don't say, why are you worried? After all, it's company expense. Okay, that kind of statement means you've got a lousy culture. And later on, when I was a CEO, I would never, for example, if you're entertaining or eating out, I would not order a scotch in a restaurant and spending company money. I will only have scotch at home on my money. But when you're outside, we will, we have to maintain certain. And today I'm told that people are saying the opposite, that they think that they have to order the most expensive thing to set an example to young people who are aspiring to live that life, which I find quite strange. Anyway, so the second statement was everyone behaves as if they are the owner of the company. The third one is where the mind is without fear. And the fourth is everybody has fun in their job. So I felt over a period of time, I evolved these 4 statements. If all these 4 are true about any team or any organization, the chances are that you have a great company. And I tried to then slowly follow that throughout. So when I was in Klüber, Freudenberg as a group, now these are things that you can't state. You have to make it a living example, right? You have to live it every day, and gradually the culture has to get generated that way. And culture doesn't come from only one person. All the people must live that way. If some of them have a different, way of functioning, you've got to see whether, that fits in or not. So I think that we built a culture broadly around these parameters. Then we started management training systems, and we started leadership development, formal programs. By that time, coaching and mentoring had become formalized. In the early days, there was no such concept, right? When I was in Hindustan Lever and all, nobody's heard of something called coaching or mentoring, other than one person is just doing it on their own. There was nothing. But in my last job, we had formal mentors and coaches, and we got qualified and all that. And I went through coaching classes and everything. It turned out really it was the same thing we've been doing for 20, 30 years. So, yeah, so that was one thing. One interesting thing, since you raised the whole gender issue, ladies, when I was running the garment business, we recruited a whole lot of women because all the fashion designers and people are all women, right? So we had to go out and recruit. In those days, there was only one National Institute of Fashion Technology in Delhi. So, and nobody would join us if we just went there and offered jobs, because nobody knew Hindustan Lever in this business. They didn't think it was a place to join. So first I started teaching over there. And through my teaching, then I could recruit. So after a year or two, we had a whole bunch of women under me. Okay, the majority of women in Hindustan Lever were under me. And they were all coming from the fashion industry, so they were dressing very flamboyantly, very unlike the rest of Hindustan Lever. So the whole board was all, calling me every day, hey, what's happening? Your whole bloody group, this is happening, that's happening. And there was a lot of inappropriate, those days, political correctness was not a big thing. So there was a lot of chit chat about this whole thing amongst the seniors. At that time, the confirmation interviews for the US Supreme Court, Clarence Thomas, the guy who was even now a Supreme Court justice, was happening. And there was accusation of sexual harassment by a lady called Anita Hill. So I was following all that, and that's the first time I heard about sexual harassment. And suddenly it occurred to me that I've got so many women, young girls actually, under me. So I asked them, do you face any problems? No, nothing. And I also thought there will be no problem. Hindustan Lever was a great company. Why would there be any problem? But I kept on because everything I read said that it's not going to come out easily. It took 6 months of talking regularly, one-on-one and in groups. Even though I was very close to all of them, we were very friendly. Before slowly things came out, every single one of them has faced something. Every single one. I was shocked. So I went to the head of HR director and I said that this is a problem, we have, and we should be the leaders and we should create some policy and have a senior lady as an ombudswoman. People can reach out to her if there's a problem, etc. I was told, forget it. This is all, they must have asked for it, and the usual male reaction in those days. So it was killed. So I was really upset by that. And in my last job, the first thing I did was write a sexual harassment policy before it became law and all that.
Well,
but very hard to bring this out. Meaning you can write policies, but most of the time, still nothing happens.
True. I've personally seen many large companies where I've heard that somebody has been asked to go because there is a sexual harassment complaint against. And the person he resigns and he gets into another company. And this is, there is no talk of this sexual harassment case. So they actually ask them that they don't, as I've seen in many companies, they don't take any action. They just ask the person that you please go leave, join another company, and we let you go and we give you all the verification.
Well, it's hard to take harder than that because then you get into legal things and, can you prove it in a court of law, etc. I don't know. It's not so easy. But even then, even a reprimand is a big thing for a manager. But it's it's a very difficult area because often or sometimes the complaint can be not genuine, right? And you can't spoil somebody's reputation for life. So you have to investigate carefully and you have to do it in a way that doesn't bring it out as gossip in the company. It has to be extremely confidential and all that. So it's not an easy area to handle, but it needs to be done.
It is.
One of the good things we had in my last job, we had 50% of the operators in the plant as women.
Wow, that's something.
And in the office, of course, we had large number of women. So that was an unusual thing.
Well,
yeah.
One other thing is, one thing is that in a structured leadership development, right? How there is a measure of one's effort towards that and all that individually. And second thing is that you also mentioned here, particularly in Unilever, there was or each manager is also measured not only by their performance but also how they're grooming their subordinates. So that effort, was there some kind of a framework given as this is how you need to do it and this is how you need to go about it, or it's something one has to
There's no framework, but obviously all the training you're doing,
should help you with
HR
that.
and this and that. And the culture has been built up that everybody will wonder if a person is not getting transferred after 2, 3 years, they themselves will ask you what's happening. When am I going to get transferred? Because they think transfer is one route to career progress.
Moving up.
Right?
Right.
So I think that, as I said, the important thing is the plan of career. Career plan is not there in most companies. You need to plan a person's career so that they're getting exposed to different things. And each position or each role is developing them in some way, throwing them into an unfamiliar situation of some kind, which is why you transfer them. Now, if I consider, let's say, an accounts guy, commercial guy who joins the company as a trainee, the first job used to be typically in internal audit. So 2 years they're in internal audit, they get to see they're doing audit of different functions, so they get to know the company very well, the processes. Then they might be an accountant in a sales branch, right? So then you know the accounting issues of sales, which is mainly to do with collections, the distribution, logistics, and in those days, sales tax.
Correct.
Right? Then you move to a factory accounting, where it's a completely different thing. There you're talking about how to build a costing system for the factory, and the tax is more excise than anything else, and dealing with the excise guys for clearing and all that. Then you come to a head office, and you have a different consolidating accounts. Then you go to treasury, banking. So you, by going around like this, after 15, 20 years, you're actually ready to be a CFO. When I leave Hindustan Lever and I look around, there are many people who become CFOs at 30, 35 in smaller companies, but they haven't had the exposure that has prepared them properly. So they're very happy now they're CFOs. The next 20 years, what do? They keep jumping from one job to the other as CFO, maybe bigger and bigger companies, maybe, global company and all that. But because this foundation was not strong, they are always going to be weak in some areas. They would have had exposure to something, but not to something else. They may be good at tax, they may be bad at treasury, or they may be, good at management accounting, but not good at tax. So there is a process and a foundation that cannot be shortcutted, in my opinion, very easily. Once you do this, you become a solid guy. Then when you become a CFO of any company, you really know your stuff and you perform well.
Correct.
So this is the same. I'm giving accounts as an example, but in any field, you have to set a foundation, the different things that you have to get used to. First is managing people under your nose. Then next is managing people who are far away from you. Right? Different type of management.
Correct.
So each of these step by step only you can build. And when the guy has done all this, then theoretically he should be really good and ready to take on large general management responsibility.
Right. See, all these large companies, in fact, they obviously prepare. I mean, if it's they don't really prepare you to become a CEO of another company, right? The idea is that eventually you may become a CEO of this very company, right?
Or
That's
you're a
the whole
CEO of a part of it, whatever.
Part of it. It's not that we want to send a CEO outside to, or even a competition.
No.
So when there is so much of thought is given to to get value so much out of employees, is there any effort in terms of preparing one for after retirement? I mean, maybe some people do that financial preparation, not necessarily retirement, but an after active life.
So, before that, if I might just add one comment to your comments. Organizations have different philosophies about retention. I mean, when you say you're not preparing for outside CEOs, some companies like, say, McKinsey or Hindustan Lever start with the management trainee type of person who has the potential to be the chairman. So if you recruit 50 of them every year and everyone can be the chairman, only one is going to make it.
Correct.
Right? So by definition, you are prepared for up or out. So at every point, those who don't make it to the next level are likely to go out.
Correct.
Because they have the potential and the ability. They can't make it in this place, they can do it somewhere else. Right?
Correct.
And it's the same in McKinsey. At every level, in McKinsey, it's even more formal. Means if you don't get the next promotion, you have to go out. You can't just hang around.
Correct.
So in such an organization, yes, people are going to go out and be CEOs and you're happy with it.
Right.
You don't
And it
think that you
was,
have to
I
retain
think,
everybody because you're not starting with people who some are average, who will hang around for 40 years. No, if you take everybody of a certain quality, then by definition, they're going to go. Otherwise, there's something wrong with your recruitment system.
correct.
Right?
I think this is something similar to what I read even in GE, where
Yes.
one becomes a CEO, the other to go and become CEOs of other companies.
Correct. Correct. Now, that's not necessarily true in all companies. So in my
Correct.
last company, that was not the case because you're not recruiting everybody like that. You're promoting right from the lowest level, from people who join as salesmen and this and that. In such a situation, there's no reason that you want people to leave. Occasionally,
Correct.
one or two might leave, but broadly, you have space for everybody to stay and reach their level of competence.
Right. So,
Okay, coming now to your next question.
correct.
In many large companies, they actually have retirement workshops.
That's
In
more
Bosch,
from a financial planning, right?
No, not financial at all. It is an emotional thing. There are many people who have not thought about retirement. Financial is a separate thing. They also cover some financials, but it's too late. At the time you're about to retire, a workshop on finances is not going to help your finances.
Correct.
Right? You've got to start doing financial planning many years before. But the emotional part is the difficult one. There are many people who have nothing else in their lives other than their jobs. Who have not built other interests or hobbies or whatever, right? Plus, their whole egos are tied up. Their self-worth
to
and
those positions and
their thing is tied up with the position and the job and all that. The day that they retire, they're completely bereft of purpose. And many of them then sink, because mentally and emotionally they have nothing to do. They sink, they physically also go down and their lives are not very great after that. So you got to prepare. So these workshops kind of, tell you that prepare yourself to do something else and blah, blah, blah. Knowing all this, I started thinking about it 4 or 5 years in advance. Okay. And so the way I thought about it is there were so many interests I had. I could have pursued many things when I was young. But I gave up many of the things saying that I don't have time. I have to focus on career and this and that. In those days, we didn't think we had the time to indulge ourselves. Like today, youngsters are able to do a bit of this, a bit of that. So there were many interests that were left by the wayside. So I thought, let me list all of them and say, today, do I want to start pursuing them? And also other things that I might now think about. And then I listed all of them and I had to think. It's not a question of one day writing down, right? You keep on thinking, really, are you going to spend months and years doing this? Is it interesting enough? Blah, blah, blah. And you keep on, fleshing it out. And there must be enough things on the list that after you start doing some of these things, some of them may not turn out to be as interesting as you thought. So you may drop them. You should still have enough to do.
Correct.
So at the end of a year or so of such thinking, I came up with a list of things that I wanted to do. And in my opinion, playing golf is not an activity, right? That's something you should have been doing anyway. If you were doing it, you continue to do it. Whatever exercise and all is part of your life. That's like saying eating or something like that is, those are not enough to occupy you. So you need some things which are intellectual, some things which are social and stuff like that. Also, I said I had the opportunity. So when I thought that all this was there, then I felt there's so much I want to do. There's not enough time left in my life. So then I asked for retirement faster than I had originally thought, because there's not enough time. So I retired a year and a half earlier than we had originally agreed, right? Because I wanted to start doing all this stuff.
Right.
So one of the things, in fact, the one thing that has taken me the maximum time is actually education. So I am a student most of the day. And that brings me to why am I a student? Because I think our education was terribly lacking. We are starting to specialize too early in life. And this whole thing about being engineer, doctor, etc., is pushing us into getting away from humanities, which is the core of being educated. So we learned engineering or management or whatever, which are all fine in one aspect. It helps your career, but it doesn't make you educated. History, understanding the growth of civilization, philosophy, these are the things that are the core of education. And there I thought I was zero. So that's basically, then I started after retiring, trying to study formally between online courses, books, etc. in some of these areas. In detail, I'd specified what I need to do, etc. So that, in my opinion, we should add to our core curriculum. We shouldn't be just looking at sciences and stuff. Even when you're doing that, you need to do a little bit of humanities more than what we are doing now.
Unfortunately, many colleges have stopped.
Many
colleges have stopped teaching because no takers. People are not signing up for
but
those
the
courses.
national education policy now insists that you have to have in engineering colleges also all this.
Yeah,
but
this
the problem
should change.
is that our society doesn't think it's important. The parents don't think it's important. The children don't think it's important. So the quality of those courses is nothing great, and it's always just something that you try to fulfill somehow, right? In Europe, in particular, they give great importance to languages. We give zero importance to languages. Already, my children, who are about 40 years old, have much poorer second and third languages than we had. Right? It's already dropped. When I went to school, our Hindi was pretty good, and a third language also we did. Wasn't great, but still okay. By the time my children went to school, there's virtually no second or third language. Even the Hindi is so bad, they can barely follow a Hindi movie. Right? So that I think is very bad. In Europe, they consider language very important. They actually take a break from school in that 11th standard or something, send their child to live with someone in a different country for a year, in a family. To live with some family just to learn that language. So German guy will go to English, English guy will go to France, blah, blah, blah. So at least 2-3 European languages they learn. And why language? Because I think it gives you an insight into the culture of that place better than any other way. We don't give importance to this at all, which I think is a problem. The second problem I'm finding is that at the time that we went to school and college, we were exposed to people of different classes. Even though we were relatively well off or went to the fancier schools, there were enough people who were not well off. And in IIT, there were large numbers. So you got exposed to the real, 70%, 80% of the people in my class from IIT came from vernacular language backgrounds. So, you got exposed to real India. Right? And you face the competition of there is competition in India to get into good colleges. But nobody thought of an alternative. We have to do it. You have to study, you have to face the competition, and you have to do it. You want to go to engineering, you want to get into IIT. I mean, I didn't even consider an alternative. I didn't try anywhere else. Have to get into IIT, that's all. And not any IIT, but only Bombay and only chemical, which means your All India rank has to be better than 180 or something like that. But today, people are reasonably well off, most of my friends. Children, even by 8th or 9th standard, assume that they're going abroad for their undergraduate itself. So they don't get into the competition. They may go to a good college abroad, that's not the point. But they are shying away from competition. And that's not good for their personalities and their character. They're going to schools where there's nobody other than people like them. Right? They never get exposed thereafter to anybody of different, backgrounds. So they're living in a bubble all their lives, and I don't like this. I think it's very bad for them finally. It's not a good education. Like we talked about leadership development, you need to be exposed and push your boundaries, right? Go into areas that you're not. So
Totally.
like that,
Yeah.
you need to be in an uncomfortable situation. You need to be able to interact with villagers or with people should be in your class from poorer backgrounds. Every school must ensure that they provide scholarships or something and get 10% of the students from very poor rural backgrounds solely for the sake of education, not for any, not for a altruistic reason, but it
Correct.
improves the education of the others.
Correct.
So
But yeah, I
that's,
think the whole system has become finding a comfort zone.
but how do you build character? It's only when you face difficulty.
Correct.
You have to go through the crucible of fire and have a hard time and come out of it with strength. Otherwise, you remain a kid all your life,
That's true.
in some
Uh,
ways. I'm not
but
saying that everybody has to go through major hardship, but you have to be exposed to different things. If you live in a cocoon of wealth and privilege, then A, it's not developing you, but B, more important, you don't know anything about your own country and about the people around. And then how do you then take leadership positions? Then what is leadership development? You have to deal with such people below you. You don't even understand them. You're coming from Mars and they're from Venus kind of thing. No, you don't, there is no exposure at all.
uh, do you think NEP is addressing that?
No.
So you are personally involved in a couple of academic institutions, right? In the
Yes.
advisory board.
Yeah.
Are there any approaches that you see coming out of these places that could be
No, see, those
looked at?
places don't suffer from this problem because
Mm,
all the students coming there have gone through some kind of entrance exams and have competed, and based on their rank, they're coming there,
or
right?
even
So
the
they're
Dharmasthala
not,
one is like that?
yeah. Any management,
Okay.
that's a management school. Every management
Okay.
school is selecting based on that CET, which is the same thing for IIMs or for, so all the management schools look at the CET rank as one
Mm.
basis. So if you're in the top ranks, you'll go to IIM. The next rank, you'll go to whatever, Bajaj or SP Jain or whatever,
All right.
and so on and so on. So each management school, depending on its ranking, will get people from this kind of ranks.
Mm.
But the people I'm talking about living in this cocoon will never go there.
Correct.
So they won't even do that entrance exam and they won't get it. Instead, they'll go to Harvard or somewhere and spend money. It's like Narayan Murthy said in some speech, I couldn't send my son to IIT because he wouldn't get in. I sent him to Harvard.
Oh, he actually said that?
He said that the percentage of guys getting into IIT is whatever, zero point 0 something. Harvard is 8%. It's much easier to get in there.
Wow.
And anyway, I
Right.
could have. So the lack of facing, see, in life, finally the competition will catch up to you somehow.
Correct.
So if you don't get exposed to it, then where is the education? Education is supposed to get you prepared for life. So this is part of that education. It's not just
Correct.
learning in class. So I think that you must face competition.
Right. Well, coming back, I'm just trying to take the conversation back into.
Yeah.
So, how are you? How would you advise somebody else to plan their second? Because you said that you picked your kind of a bucket list that you had, and you very diligently evaluated what is it that you really want to be doing, how much time do you want to be spending, is it really worthwhile? Uh, I think very few people are engineered to do something like that because you actually spend time evaluating each of the aspects. But if is there something a very uh, broad thumb rule that you can give for people so that if they want?
No, I mean, I think everybody has to go through this process. And then you might decide that I don't have so many interests. I'm not interested in all this stuff, right? I was only interested in my job. Then go, full-fledged after finding consulting assignments or other things. that are corporate type to keep you going, maybe independent directors, then, organize your life around that. Maybe do a certified coaching, become a coach, get certified onto the IDD for independent directorships, study that, become good at that, offer yourself for directorships and use your contacts network, get that done, become a consultant. But all of these, in my experience, don't last long. The first 2, 3, 4 years after you retire, somebody might give you some assignments because they knew you in your previous job. It's a hangover from your job. But once 6, 7, 8 years have passed, the assumption is that you're now dated. Unless you can show that you're learning and you're a new, renewed person with more value to add, which is hard unless you really study and do things to show that you're a different and better person than when you retired.
Right.
It's very hard. So very few people continue to get consulting assignments. They start dwindling. 4 years, 5 years, 6 years after retirement, they start dwindling, and then that's the end of it. So this alone won't keep you going for, assuming that you nowadays will live till 85, 90, how long will this go on? If you retire at, I don't know, 60, 63, whatever, each company has its own, it'll take you for another 5 years, but that's still not good enough. So you still need things that you can do outside of corporate life. You can travel a bit, you can play golf a bit, but you need to do other more interest. You can do social work, right? But then you have to build it up. You can't just say, I'll do social work. You have to build up the network, the contacts, and decide exactly what you're going to do. And that there's huge demand for it, for really good people to do things. You can do teaching. Again, CEO type guys are used to going and giving gyan for 1 hour and coming away. Nobody wants that. They want, a management school wants you to take a whole course.
Correct.
A 1 semester course, 16 weeks, 4.5 hours a week on whatever subject you want. Are you willing to do that? Then you have to, because it has to fit into the curriculum. They can't just have guys coming for 1 hour and going and saying something, right? That's okay as an extracurricular thing, but not for the serious stuff. So then you have to prepare yourself so that you're academically able to do this. It's not just your experience. You must also fit into the curriculum. Guys have to, pass the exams and have the requisite theoretical knowledge that you're doing a good job with that subject. If you're willing to do that, then that's another thing you can do for 10 years, 15 years, because you can bring your practical experience along with the theory, better than a full-time academician.
Correct.
So I thought, again, part of Hindustan Lever's activities to develop yourselves, we decided to teach MBA classes. And we did it for 14 years, every year in Bombay, in 2 colleges. I took a course for 4 months, 4.5 hours a week, in spite of
Do you still
traveling
teach
20 days.
here? Do you still
Very
teach
little now. I did a little bit, but now very little. It's become, as I said, you have to be willing to dedicate yourself to do a whole course. Now, I don't want to do, I'm not interested in learning the basic courses and teaching them, right, in their curriculum. So I would, for argument's sake, be willing to develop a course on leadership development or on leadership. But it doesn't fit into anybody's curriculum. They don't want it.
What about writing a book then?
It's not in the official curriculum of any MBA.
Correct. No, but how about writing as a book? Have you thought of it?
We could, but again, I have to think about, I've been thinking, again, whatever we are talking about is not enough. There has to be case studies, there has to be theory. Maybe one day we'll get to it. I'm not convinced that I have enough of really new things to add to make a whole book. It's enough to write an article, but not.
Okay.
Let me see.
And you keep.
It's not a closed book.
So what are the things that keep you busy now then?
As I said, one important one is studying. The
So how
second
many
is
hours in a
keeping
day do you make it for that?
7-8 hours.
Wow.
2 hours I exercise. And maybe an hour or two on these boards, and two corporate boards, and I think one of them will require more time in future. But till now, it was not that much. I was spending a lot of time the last 1 year on the startup incubation of IIT Palakkad. But these things go up and down depending on how many startup teams have to be mentored and so on. So right now that's down. But one of the companies may need more time. So one of the things I wanted to do is not have more than 15-20% of my time on corporate type of things. Because otherwise I need not have retired in the first place. Could have done it full time. So, other things. Then maybe, learn some instrument or a bit of that stuff I'm doing. So different things like that.
Wonderful. And
then of course, grandchildren and all the family commitments.
And you travel as well.
Yeah, but travel is linked to something. I mean, not for the heck
Oh,
of it.
okay. Okay, so it's not like you have a list of places that you want to cover, visit.
No, I mean, see, as I told you, I travel 15 to 20 days a month throughout my working life.
So
And
you want
I
to go
did
easy
not,
now.
no, and I did not, when I traveled, first of all, in India, I've, gone village to village, not just lying to a city and back, right? And I've seen, and I took interest to understand the agriculture around and the culture. So I've done a lot of that. At this stage in my life, seeing new places, I don't mind, but there is no end to new places. You can do it every day and there'll still be many more places. So I think more important than places now for me is people. So I
Who
travel to
you
meet
travel with.
friends, old friends. I want to make sure that I'll meet, my really good friends at least once a year. Actually, now it's working out to twice a year. And mostly in the US. They'll come once a year and stay with me. I will go and try to visit them. There are lots of friends actually passing away. We're getting on now. So who knows? One has to make the time to visit friends, family, whoever, people that you want to spend time with.
Right. Just one last
And then around
question.
that, I can do other things. Sorry.
Correct. One last question I wanted to ask more from the leadership part, which I missed. It came to my mind. I'm sure you're learning, you're keeping track of what's happening today, and there is so much of reference to gig economy and all that. So, what's your view on the gig economy, where it's basically individuals and the leadership, because today businesses are run uh, with there are people who are not part of the organization, but there are significant dependencies on these people. So,
So I see it
what's your
in,
view on that?
I'll answer that in 2-3 different ways. Okay. There are industries where of necessity they have to be gig. Let's say deliveries of pizzas and that kind of stuff. In which I mean, there's no option. That is the way that model will work. You have to make sure that the guys are safe, taken care of, paid a decent wage, managed like any other organization. Just because they're gig doesn't mean that you treat them like, dirt. You got to develop, the supervisor needs to spend time with them, looking after their needs and developing them, right? Make them into the future supervisors. And the basics have to be there. The timing required for them to deliver something shouldn't be such that they have to drive so crazily and things like that. Somebody must look at their infrastructure, their bikes, whatnot. The second part is where large companies have now moved, in India particularly, because of the Industrial Disputes Act and all the history of labor issues with our laws, have significantly changed their employment structure, so that the bulk of the unskilled or slightly skilled workmen are now contract. I totally disagree with that. Okay. Even good companies which have only skilled people, let me take TVS in Hosur, have not recruited a full-time employee in some 7 or 8 years. So the bulk of their work is being done by interns, apprentices. So they're keeping on rotating. If you look at a tire company, 60-70% of the people are temporaries or contract workers.
Contract.
Maruti, Gurgaon, etc. Same thing. Now, this is very, very, very bad. Okay. These guys are not trained at all. They come and they go every 1 year or 2 years. Theoretically 6 months, but they keep coming back. So they are expected to do the work without training. There's no development activity. There's nothing. How will they do a good job? The quality will go downhill. It is going downhill because a lot of the key jobs are being done by fellows who don't have training. Number one. Number two, within the workmen, you created a Brahmin and Shudra. The permanent employees think that they are Brahmins. In Maruti, for example, they sit around, they don't do anything. They only order these fellows to do all the work. That is the main reason that there was violence a few years ago and the HR manager was killed. Right? They gave many reasons, but the real reason is this. It was a violence by the contract guys against the permanent guys because they were being bullied so much. And there's a huge difference in the salary for the same work. So I totally disagree with this. We've got to correct our legal system, make everybody a permanent employee, train them properly, but make it easy to lay off or fire for good reasons. If guys are misbehaving, this, that, and all, it shouldn't require lengthy legal process to get rid of it. But this moving people out of, and this is partly created by the courts. When I was starting work, we could not employ a single contract worker. It was illegal. It still is illegal, but everybody is turning a blind eye to it. According to the acts involved, contract worker cannot be used for regular work. They have to be used only for work which is temporary in nature. The work which is being done every day in and day out throughout the year has to be permanent employees. And in our younger days, you could not have violated that because immediately the union will go to court and the court will find against you. Nowadays, the courts have become lenient and the unions no longer represent the contract workers. They've also become cushy. They can't be bothered with these guys. They take care of only the small part of the permanent workers. And gradually they get themselves out of business because those guys are reducing and retiring slowly and no new guys are being taken. So as they vanish, the union will vanish. And you'll have a different union that only represents the contract workers. So this part of organized companies doing this, I think, is totally wrong.
Interestingly, there was an article by Bala on why it is important to have union sometime back yet.
Yeah, that's one of his. That's one angle. I'm not saying good or bad, meaning you can have a union or you can have some form of representation of manner of talking to the workers, whether you call it a union or not. The last thing, not directly connected, but indirectly connected. Over the last, say, 15, 20 years, post-liberalization, one of the things that has happened is top management salaries have grown disproportionately to overall salaries in India, right? So the multiple of what the CEO earns to the factory worker has gone up many, many times and is now, it's not yet at US levels, but it's much higher than it used to be and is much higher than Germany and France. Okay. And this, as it is, we have a problem of inequality in our society. You have the Adanis and Ambanis and so on, so many multimillionaires making. And you have the bottom level, as you've seen in the last at least 5-7 years, you can see this so-called K-shaped economy, etc. The bottom is not rising in their incomes, whereas some people are making a lot of money. That social structure and Piketty's books and all that, which bring all this out, is a problem in the long run. We will not be able to live like this because ultimately it will cause unrest and social unrest, and the lower levels will not just accept this forever. The little bit that we can influence is corporate life. So I strongly believe that leaders must tone down their increases and share more with the lower levels. For example, in a global company, I mean, it's happened to me, there'll be a recession, let's say 2008-9 recession in the world. There'll be a global mandate that you have to cut 10% of your headcount, right? Which is typical. When a mandate like that comes, what does the leader here do? 10% means 10% of the workmen will go. What is the workman being paid? And it will be the junior most workman, right? He's typically paid, I don't know, 1 lakh a year or 1.5 lakhs a year. So I would push back and say, sorry, cut 5% of salary of the top 5 guys. You'll get more than the 10% of the guys that you would have sacked. And that's what I did. Or freeze the salary of the top 3-4 guys and all expats. They are the most expensive. And they won't feel the pinch. Instead of screwing those guys earning 1 lakh and 1.5 lakhs a year. So these are the sort of things I think that leaders have to think about. I mean, not only lining themselves, their own pockets. This is a serious social issue, and we have to really address it. We have to increase the salary levels at some level, at the lower and middle levels, and cap the increases at the top. In whatever way you want, it can be through bonuses, productivity incentives, blah, blah, blah. Everything that will help the company to do well. But this gap cannot keep on widening, otherwise we'll have a problem.
Interesting. We could probably have another conversation only on that, and probably along with someone like Bala also brought into this conversation. So I was just thinking that would be really interesting to have. So wonderful. Thank you so much, Viju. I see that your time is up. So thank you once again, and to the audience and listeners, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And please do share this conversation with everybody you think who will benefit out of this. And do follow the links are right below, and do come back because I'll hope to get another session with Viju to get his perspectives on future, and also get him to make some predictions as well. And till we meet, enjoy the ride and subscribe if you have not yet subscribed to Future Fast. Viju, once again, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Nandu. Pleasure to talk to you. All the best.
Thank you.